Now, the importance of the healthcare sector can never be overstated. Now, they form an essential foundation for the country, and their role, especially in the last 2 years, has further emphasized that their nurturing is essential if humankind needs to look towards a healthy future. Now, amidst these cataclysmic changes that we experienced, the healthcare sector too has seen paradigm shifting transformations with challenges around scalability and accessibility and immediacy really driving that transformation. And what we are seeing and what we really want to see more of is the coming together of diverse industries, which will work towards enabling the healthcare sector to really scale up and deliver to the needs of the hour and the hours in the future. Today, our conversation is about healthcare financing to enable the medical sector and how they can scale up for India's well-being. And to help us understand the importance of this and the challenges and the opportunities ahead, we have with us Dr. Ashutosh Raghuvanshi, the CEO of Fortis Healthcare. Now, Fortis is a household name in urban India. They're amongst the top hospitals in India with a network of more than 30 hospitals across the country. Welcome, Dr. Raghuvanshi. Pleasure to have you join us here with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, sir. We have with us Dr. Arjun Dang, the CEO of Dr. Dang's Labs, a highly awarded medical diagnostic service that has served the country for over 4 decades. And notably, they have been recognized with the FICCI Healthcare Excellence Award for their exceptional quality and medical services. Dr. Dang, welcome aboard. Thanks for joining in.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I would also now like to welcome back, really, Sunil Daga, the President and Head of Business Banking Assets at Kotak Mahindra Bank Limited. Mr. Daga had joined us earlier on Business Insider as well. And Mr. Daga heads the Pan-India business for business loans and working capital solutions and has over 2 decades of experience in the BFSI sector. Now, he built Kotak's working capital division from scratch since 2012, and it has powered many MSME success stories. Welcome back, Mr. Daga.
Yeah, thanks, Ashwin. Nice to connect.
Thank you again. Now, gentlemen, really, post 2020, it's obvious there's been a huge surge in the demand for healthcare services. And really what I'd like to discuss with you gentlemen today is two-pronged. Really a focus on really what are the areas that have been adequately covered and what are the extreme demand areas that need our immediate attention and immediate servicing, or so to speak. Dr. Raghuvanshi?
Yeah, I think, one of the biggest challenge in delivery has been on the human resources side. So there is, that is one element which we must keep in mind as we discuss what are the other structural elements which we need to work on. And I think this is one area which is of grave concern because it takes long time to prepare the right kind of manpower, both in the clinical side and paramedical side as well. Other than that, I think another problem which India has is the kind of very different kind of availability of healthcare infrastructure of secondary and tertiary nature in the tier 2, tier 3 towns. And some states are adequately served, whereas there are certain states where the number of tertiary care and secondary care hospitals are completely inadequate. So I think the regional imbalances in the way the infrastructure is spread is another very, very major concern. Majority of population lives in tier 2, tier 3 towns, and those areas are not that well served. Now, these are, in my mind, two top concerns for India.
And what have we been doing reasonably well in?
So some of there are islands of excellence, I would say, around all this in tertiary care. There are hospitals, within our group and in other groups, which have been doing excellent quality clinical work in the tertiary care setups in India. And also there are a lot of public sector hospitals which have done phenomenal job. And some of those which come to my mind is like Jaideva Institute of Cardiology in Bangalore is as good as any heart hospital can be. So there are many examples of these islands of excellence in public as well as private sector. But that is not sufficient considering what our population requires. So I think we need to see how those models can be scaled up further and taken to a wider population. I think that should be our focus to see how we can build on that. So urban areas, especially the metros, are quite well served, though there may be some deficiencies there as well. But overall, I think that's the area which needs to be sort of taken to the next level, and we should use those experiences and learnings in other areas.
Replication of excellence. Dr. Dang, how are you looking at this?
So certainly agree with my fellow panelists here on the basic fact that the man behind the machine is critical at these times when technology itself is developing and everything is being ramped up. I think getting the right manpower in the right places is extremely critical. Also, I was reading a study where it says that there is a deficiency of 6.4 million healthcare workers currently in India, and that's a huge gap to fill. And I think it will be crucial to ramp up educational facilities, even medical, paramedical facilities to get the right manpower for these operations. Also, on the second point is that yes, tertiary care and secondary care requires a lot of focus, and especially in tier 2, tier 3 cities, also as Sir just mentioned. But also, I would like to mention that I feel that the entire ecosystem of healthcare in India, and I think it's been mentioned more than a few times before also, is that it is more reactive. And that's what we saw in the COVID pandemic, especially in the second surge as well. And it is more reactive, so it has to be more active with a more focus or a higher focus on wellness as compared to sick care. And for that, I feel the starting point would be to have a robust channel of primary healthcare, because that is the first touch point of any person who has any kind of illness. Again, making these touch points and having a huge network might not be enough, but it would be very important to reduce the OOPE or the out of pocket expenditure so that the keenness for good health is further heightened. And we also see that post COVID that the awareness for good health is anyway on the rise. So I think incentivizing the common man, and we can certainly nip it in the bud right there. Also, adequately serviced areas, I would say that the vaccination drive has been a wonderful example of how India has taken the lead in giving the vaccine and the inoculation drives all over the country. So I think that is something that we can look at as an example of actually imbibing into our other healthcare facilities.
I'm particularly curious by your usage of the phrase "India's healthcare is reactive." That very nicely tapers into what I want to be discussing later in the show. And I want to bring in Mr. Daga right now, in the sense that you moved very quickly as a financial institution to be able to really create a product that is going to help this industry. And what are your particular focus? I mean, where do you want to be able to ensure that there's an impact with the services and with the products that you're creating out at Kotak?
Yeah, sure. So no, basically, basically we look at it in a very different way. I think, we say that, in fact, we have started the journey. India has started the journey on healthcare. That's what we look at it as. And I think the budget also is one of the ways to, also, clearly articulates that the healthcare spend would move from 1.2% of GDP to 2.5% of GDP over next couple of years. And we believe that it's a very significant amount. It's a really, really large amount, even though it may not be equivalent to some of the other countries today. But the quantum of money itself can spur a lot of investment around healthcare. And as you know, I would like to say "Der hai but durust hai." So I think this has been a very, very welcome move of both from the private sector and the government at large. Looking at this whole canvas, we are very, very keen that how do we participate in this ecosystem and how can we support this ecosystem. And when I say ecosystem, it has a little broader meaning, around. Primarily, the way we have seen the market, we being the youngest in this space, coming in as a younger player, and always younger guys gets more attention than the older ones. So I think to that, so I would take it as a advantage for ourselves, and say that today I think the industry is servicing the sector in bits and pieces. I think it has to get stitched together. It is a lot of asset financing which every model is trying to build. We are clearly looking at how can we build asset and cash flow based lending, and connecting the patient to the manufacturer, that whole spectrum. I think that's how we are looking at this whole space, and extremely excited, about this whole opportunity and the way we can serve this particular fraternity. And Ashwin, we are as good as COVID warriors with this, fraternity. So not even a single day, we have shut our shop, during this pandemic.
Well, absolutely. You were a part of the essential services that kind of oiled the economic machinery to keep chugging while everything else was slowly grinding to a halt. It's very curious that I'm getting the perspectives. I mean, Dr. Raghuvanshi, you spoke about the human challenges that existed. Dr. Dank, you spoke about how the fact that we need to plan much further into the future. To enable you to do this and to not do this over an extended period of time, but something that you want to be able to do it quickly, because you do have your challenges of scalability, which is perhaps one of the bigger challenges, and you have a technology concern that is coming up that can multiply that scalability factor as well. What kind of support are you really anticipating from the financial institutions to be able to enable you to kind of move on this augmented trajectory, or so to speak? Dr. Raghuvanshi?
I would say that the financial institutions have been supportive even in the past. I think where the gap is coming is that financial institutions will always be supportive of any business which has a proper returns and has the ability to service whatever debt they take, and the cash flows are able to handle that. So I think that equation is pretty simple. So expecting anything further from the financial institutions, I think would be unfair. However, there are many initiatives which can be done at the government level, where the hospital infrastructure should be treated slightly differently. Now, the hospitals have to pay commercial rate of interest in most of the states for electricity, for example. I'm just using that as an example. And that is like, the hospitals are being equated with a shopping mall and a movie theater. So that kind of tariff you're supposed to pay. Now, those things are probably more important to provide support to the hospitals so that they can have a viable business model. Otherwise, what happens is that if you go to tier 2, tier 3 cities, which I earlier mentioned, the reason why the infrastructure doesn't develop there is that the running costs in those areas are higher than a larger city. Why they are higher? Because the manpower for providing tertiary care, if you have to attract them to go to those areas, you have to pay them more. Whereas the ability of people to pay in those areas is less. So that makes it a kind of an economically unviable proposition. And that's precisely the reason why most of the entrepreneurs are not putting up hospitals in those areas, or are putting up smaller hospitals. So I think if these kind of structural reforms are done and healthcare as an industry is treated differently and is given some kinds of incentives on the operational side, then they will be able to support. There is enough capital available from the financial institutions. We have never felt that the support was lacking from the financial industry. And that's precisely the reason why the Indian healthcare, the private sector healthcare, has reached where it has reached. If that support wasn't available, then this would have not been possible as well. So I think there is enough support there, but I think more needs to be done on the policy side of healthcare.
Thank you. Dr. Dang?
So completely agree once again that in the past we've seen a lot of support and a lot of good support also from these global financial giants like World Bank or maybe BMGF. But also what I feel needs to be stressed more, apart from just the capital funding that we get, is monitoring and evaluation. Now, we've seen that in a lot of programs and projects also, where a constant guidance or monitoring is required for the success of that particular project. Also, apart from this, what I mentioned earlier was to ramp up again infrastructure, primary health facilities, reduce out-of-pocket expenses would be something that needs to be focused on, and also funding for research activities for chronic illnesses, etc., and also a lot of education and awareness, especially in the tier 2, tier 3 rural areas, also about simple diseases, preventive checks, the prevention techniques that are available. And also, lastly, I would also like to say that probably the funding for tech startups or mid tech startups is something that is the future. And for India to actually take the lead in being the global country that has the knowledge and the talent to come up with newer and novel things, I think funding these startups and these youngsters that have a world of ideas with them is the need of the hour.
And technology is going to be a focus in just about a moment. I just want to bring in Mr. Daga out here. From a banking perspective, what kind of support are you looking to enable to ensure that the industry is supported through this rather challenging time?
So, let's look at funding and split it into two parts, Ashwin. One is, the core funding which any enterprise today gets through equity. And one is the debt, which I think, Dr. Ashutosh also did touch upon. And, if any firm has a reasonably strong, capital structure in terms of equity and, certain amount of debt, I think that enough debt is available in the market by the financial institutions and the banks to fund growth for reasons for a complete healthcare system. Now, the core issue which to make the whole piece, one is accessible and affordable from a healthcare point of view. I think what we need is a robust equity side of the piece, which how do small firms get equity? Now, I think that's a moot point about any enterprise to grow, because if they are not able to get enough equity in their business, then for them to raise debt is obviously challenging. And large corporations in the same field are able to do it, and that's the reason I think we have seen names like Fortes and Apollo, and they have really scaled up. Dr. Lal Path Lab, and I can go on, but I think the whole piece is that how do we make it more inclusive, and I think that's where I think the whole challenge is, and that's how the reach around tier 3, tier 4 cities, etc., starts coming there in terms of affordable and accessible and accurate healthcare services which can be built. So I think that's the question which we are also trying to answer. And I think that's the broad strategy about what we are thinking about, that how do we make it affordable and how do we make finance accessible across the length and breadth of the country where we have our branches.
Thank you for that, Mr. Daga. Now, Dr. Dang spoke about technology, and I really want to focus a moment on this especially. Now, technology has been seen as an enabler for growth in the healthcare sector. And I really want to get a perspective on Dr. Raghuvanshi on this as to how are you as Fortis looking at technology to be able to help you really scale up, ensure continuity, ensure growth. Talk to us about how you are looking at, the tech aspect to be able to help you, grow the sector.
Yeah. So I believe technology is definitely going to play a very important part in the delivery of healthcare. So far, it is only there in the equipment, etc. Healthcare has been a little too slow to adopt technology as far as the delivery of the care is concerned. But now there has been a very rapid development, and it was catalyzed by the pandemic as well. And some of the technologies which are very simple and were available for a long time were not utilized as much as they could have been, the teleconsultation being one such example. And there are many services, many components of the services which can be very efficiently provided through telemedicine route, like mental health consultations, which can be done in large numbers. At the same time, some of the primary health and some other elements of care chronic disease management is another one. All these areas could be totally dependent on technology. Organizations such as ours focus more on acute and procedure-based care. So that setting will always remain a hospital setting. However, there are many components in the patient funnel, how the patient access the services, how they make the diagnosis, etc., where technology is playing more and more bigger role there. So as an organization, we are creating a kind of a backbone, or a not really a super app, but an app which becomes an interface between the patient, their patient journey, and the hospitals. And the one of the most important elements of that, which will support the development of such initiatives and make them more accessible, is the policy which the Prime Minister has announced about the digital health mission. I think that is going to transform the way the healthcare infrastructure ecosystem operates and functions. Because what will happen now is that this is an interoperable system. All the patient information, medical records, say a patient goes to Dr. Dang's lab and does an investigation, those reports seamlessly go to the doctors. Patient doesn't have to carry, the format is same, understanding is same, the same information can follow to on and flow to the payer, for example, the insurance. So all that is becomes a completely seamless journey. So technology is going to play a very, very major part. So as an organization, I think it is important not only for us, but for all providers and all different parts of the ecosystem, be it pharmacies, or be it home care, or be physiotherapy, or the laboratories. All of them have to become digitized to be part of a meaningful player in the entire ecosystem. So I think digitization of operations becomes the most important step, and we are focusing heavily on that.
Dr. Raghuvanshi, what you just outlined is a huge technological challenge as well. While the data exists, the problem is the data is all in silos and they're not talking to each other, which is falling a huge gap between how the data is moving from one place to the other. And yeah, you've kind of hit the nail on the head. That is what the tech companies are now trying to figure out. We're trying to work with the government as to how do you make them all talk to each other? How do you create a standard for how this data is shared in a safe and secure way? But thank you for that. Dr. Dang, I presume technology is what kind of helped you scale up dramatically over the last couple of years. Yeah.
Sure. So Ashwin, very, very pertinent to discuss technology in this forum and how healthcare goes hand in hand with technology. And I would certainly feel, although technology adoption has been on the rise, I think COVID has really given it wings. And starting with simple things like first, I'd like to just outline the challenges that technology can probably cater to. So again, like Mr. Daga said, affordability and accessibility is probably at the top of the list. And then we have that huge gap in manpower as well that we were talking about earlier. So when we speak about technology and how COVID's actually transformed the entire adoption, I would certainly give the prime example of telemedicine. And earlier people were very, very apprehensive to go in for teleconsults, but I think COVID actually made it the most common form of consulting a doctor. Then we have blockchain as well to actually monitor inventory, maybe pharma value addition also. So can't speak too much about blockchain here, but that is certainly something that needs further adoption. Then we also have robotics not only in precision surgeries, in tertiary care hospitals and specialized surgeries, but also contactless services in hospitals that I've seen, like even nursing staff, etc., are assisted by these robots. Apart from that, point of care testing and point of care medical devices, again, a lot of attention has gone to this in the diagnostic sector. And not only to actually implement and use them, but also primarily having these focused on rural areas, because last mile delivery for quality diagnostics with a good turnaround time, I think is actually the key to the lock of preventing all these NCDs that we are actually facing today. Apart from this, also IoT, that is Internet of Medical Things, to integrate all the healthcare data that we have to actually make the entire healthcare ecosystem very, very patient centric, where it's not the patient who's running from pillar to post, but the different services that he needs are not only conveyed to him in a very, very effective manner, but is much easier for him to actually get them as well. And finally, and absolutely the most important, being artificial intelligence. Again, in the field of diagnostics, also we've seen tremendous leaps in the analytical segment or inside the lab, where we've seen big companies like global companies like Philips, Siemens, Microsoft, etc., actually collaborate with labs to give them the push in the analytical segment. It's actually great news, but the prostate biopsy AI algorithm actually received an FDA approval a few days back. So I think it's a great time. But actually, what needs to also be focused on is that it's very interesting. But some people call it a catalyst, some people call it a lever. But the way that I look at it is adoption of technology in healthcare right now is actually to change the tire of a moving vehicle. And obviously, that comes with its own challenges. But I think COVID has certainly given the technology adoption in the healthcare sector wings. And I think there is abundant light at the end of this tunnel.
It's very interesting to talk about changing the tires of a moving vehicle and the catalyst form of technology, because a lot of tech forums, one of the most often quoted statistic is that they say that what would have taken 10 years took about a year in terms of adoption of technology. That's how quickly we moved in terms of adoption of technology. Mr. Daga, how are you looking at, to be able to use technology and to be able to support technology as a part of your offerings?
Luckily, for banking, I think we are ahead of curve on healthcare, from healthcare as such, in terms of tech part is concerned. And we were among the first banks to actually launch a 811 account, which is just on the fly through OTP, etc. And thanks to government architecture on Aadhaar, which is helping all this. So I think banks are really ahead on that. UPI is other use case which you would be, obviously looking at it. FASTag is a brilliant story. Again, how banks and industry can come together and create something. Today, all the toll payments, users zips are across all tolls today. So I think, there is a greater engagement required on the healthcare side. But what I've seen interesting is that, within healthcare, I've seen two set of, customer segments. One is who are relatively younger, or the willingness to change or adapt to technology is far superior. So they are very, very open to co-create with us. So I think what we are trying to do is that how can we co-create a product for them, and they want an end-to-end ecosystem funding, etc. And then there is a set of an organization which has a own set of processes, etc. And for there, I think the willingness to change is lesser. Having said that, I think as time passes by, as the whole ecosystem starts evolving, eventually I don't think there is an option to technology. Without technology, I think businesses will struggle, because if you need to get scale, if you need to get affordability, I think tech is only way to do it. And then classic example is the COVID app, which the way you are vaccinating such a large population, and I'm sure that many of us have seen that in US initially when vaccination was done, you were giving a plain paper chit, and India was one who was giving a digital certificate. So I think clearly we are ahead on it. I think it's about responsibility of the banks and the industry together to co-create some of these technology platforms. As I said, from a banking perspective, I think we are fairly digital. And in terms of today, the way we fetch customer information to appraise from his GST returns to an income tax, returns which he has filed to the income tax authorities, whether it is the KYC, I think all of that on a fly today we can collect from customers and make sense out of it about how we should go about appraising a particular proposal. What the larger context remains is that how do I stitch the customer pain areas and his businesses, whether it is funding his patient who needs money today to undergo a surgery, or is it the manufacturer, which is a Philips or a Siemens or a GE, and how do I link everything together? I think that's the missing part, which we will co-create with the industry itself.
Thank you for that. And we're nearing the end of our discussion time. I just want to quickly wrap up by having all of you come in on really what are the immediate focus areas that you would personally want more emphasis on in the, in an immediate short term in the next 1 to 2 years to ensure that, we are on track with the demands at this point of time and your expected demands over a period of time as well. Dr. Raghuvanshi?
I think two areas which I think should be focused on. One is the medical education reforms.
Mhm.
That is, government has already started, but I think those need to be speeded up in order to fulfill the shortages. That's one. And the second area, which again government has initiated, is the digital health mission, which is the standardization, as we spoke about earlier. They've already started that as a sandbox project where several labs, large chains, and several hospital chains are already involved in the standardization process. So I think those two are the most important priorities in order to make healthcare more accessible, efficient, and affordable.
Dr. Dang?
So again, completely agree with my fellow panelists on these points. But just to add to that, so I would add primary healthcare to that list, and again reducing out-of-pocket expenditure for the common man, because that would be the starting step to focusing on wellness and not on sick care, to avoid any such pandemics and also the brewing pandemic of non-communicable diseases like diabetes and hypertension.
Mr. Daga, do you want to help us understand as to what are your immediate focus areas from the Kotak Bank's perspective, so that you can see the change that you have envisioned as you have built this product?
So I think the clear ones, which I said, that we are clearly want to co-create products with the industry. I think the new normal, with this industry would be very different in terms of the way banks cater to them. And for us, I think the biggest game changer, which we feel would happen, is that how the insurance penetration, which has not been talked about today, would actually evolve over a period of years. I think insurance will make it really, really, really large as more and more people avail insurance. I think affordability could be one of the issues which can get addressed outside tech and things like that. And insurance, banks are equally, banks do have a stake in insurance, as a product.
Yeah. Excellent. On that note, Dr. Raghuvanshi, Dr. Dang, Mr. Daga, thank you so much for really spending your time with us here in Business Insider India, and for us to really get a perspective as to the demands that are existing right now in the healthcare sector and how financial institutions can really come together to be able to enable you to work past those challenges and really scale yourself for a future trajectory of growth. On that note, thank you all so much for joining us, and thank you for watching this segment on Business Insider India.